The village of Oakhaven was named for its magnificent boundary, a colossal, ancient oak that stood sentinel at the edge of the world's oldest, darkest wood, the Whisperwood.
Look how strong the great oak stands, Jorun. It watches over us still.
For generations, since Roman Empire, Oakhaven prospered. Its fields yielded corn the color of gold, its river ran clear and cold, and its people were content, asking little of the world beyond their sturdy wooden palisades. But everything Oakhaven possessed was shadowed by the Whisperwood. Deep within the loam and the tangled roots of the Whisperwood lived the Scolopendrids. They were not insects, nor merely creatures of the earth, but things of legend, the remnants of an age when everything was larger and fiercer. These were giant centipedes, black as dried ink, with segmented bodies thicker than a man's forearm, reaching lengths of up to 7 feet. Their hundreds of legs moved with a strange, synchronized grace, and their forcipules, powerful hooked jaws, held venom that caused neither death nor pain, but a paralysis of pure, waking horror. The villagers had always known of them, treating them as a necessary boundary to the unknown wilderness, contained by the dense, thorny undergrowth that seemed to naturally repel anything larger than a squirrel. The Scolopendrids, for their part, cared nothing for the villagers. They were the old watchers of the forest floor, their lives dedicated to hunting the enormous grubs and subterranean beasts that few humans ever saw. They had their territory, and Oakhaven had theirs. The peace began to fray when the seasons shifted. For 3 successive years, the rains were scant, and the river, usually a torrent, shrank to a miserable trickle. The soil of Oakhaven turned dusty, and the crop yields dwindled. The elders pleaded with the young men to venture further into the Whisperwood, seeking the rich, moist sun moss that grew only beneath the forest's densest canopy. This moss, when dried and mixed with river clay, could hold water for weeks, saving their failing fields. But the sun moss lay deep in the heart of the centipede territory. The first expedition was led by Jorun, a miller and the village's most stoic and practical man. He was accompanied by Alara, the village's herbalist, who knew the forest's boundaries better than anyone. Alara's mother had taught her that the centipedes were creatures of routine, protectors of their own borders, and never ventured onto dry, open soil.
Stay to the dry paths, Jorun. The moment you see the shimmering black of their chitin, you turn back. Fear the dampest hollows, that is where they nest.
They found the sun moss, thick and luminous green, but they also found the signs of recent, immense growth. Where before they might have seen one Scolopendrid carapace fragment in a season, they now saw dozens. The creatures were multiplying. The centipedes had begun to use the sun moss, not just as a hunting ground, but as nesting material.
They are claiming the ground. They are pushing out. We need the moss, but we can't touch it without disturbing their nests.
Hurry! We must gather more!
Look, the ground is moving.
They're coming! Run!
It was Aric, a young farmer, who saw it first. A jet-black segment the size of a roofing slate rising silently from beneath a bed of ferns.
Run, everyone,
Then came
run!
another, and another, until the whole creature, easily 8 feet long and 3 times the girth of any centipede seen before, unfolded itself. It was a matriarch, guarding the deepest nest. They all ran quickly with fear after seeing it. Jorun and the others managed to spear the centipede's head with their copper poles, causing it to drop Aric and retreat with a furious hiss. They pulled the boy back to Oakhaven. Aric was unharmed, physically, but he was changed. The centipede's venom was a paralytic unique to its kind. For 3 days, Aric lay rigid on his bed, his eyes wide open, his mind fully awake, trapped in a silent, immobile prison of his own body. He could hear, smell, and think, but he could not move a single muscle, nor scream. He was lucidly buried alive in his own flesh. When the paralysis finally broke, Aric was released, sobbing and incoherent. He would never enter the Whisperwood again. He was proof that the centipedes held a terror far worse than simple death. Aric's condition was the final blow to the village's caution. Fear replaced respect. Jorun convened a council. "We have three choices," he announced, standing before the gathered villagers in the flickering light of the community hall. "We abandon Oakhaven, which is impossible. We starve, which is inevitable if we don't get the moss. Or we fight." Alara stood, her face drawn. "We must not forget that we trespassed. They are creatures of defense, not conquest. If we can divert them, if we can find a replacement for the moss." "And what is the replacement for our lives, Alara?" Jorun cut her off, his voice hard. "They have tasted human fear. They are growing larger, stronger, and bolder every year. If they claim the sun moss, they will claim the forest, and eventually they will claim our farms, for they need the moisture the moss provides. We cannot coexist with a creature that can bury a man alive inside his own skin." The decision was unanimous. Driven by the recent terror and the gnawing hunger, the villagers chose the fight. Over the next week, the sounds of industry replaced the sounds of farming. Blacksmiths forged spears with broad, flat copper heads, designed not to pierce, but to crush and sever the centipede's segmented bodies. Carpenters built wooden nets lined with fine copper wire, hoping to entangle the creature's innumerable legs. Most importantly, every man and woman gathered pitch, dry kindling, and oil, preparing the one true weapon that terrified creatures of the damp earth: fire. They chose the night of the new moon, when the forest was a suffocating canvas of blackness, hoping the centipedes, creatures adapted to subterranean shadows, would be blinded by the sudden shock of intense light. 70 villagers marched toward the Whisperwood, not in armor, but in homespun cloth soaked in vinegar to mask their scent, their faces grim. Jorun led the vanguard with a flaming torch and a heavy copper maul. Alara walked toward the middle, carrying not a weapon, but a small, rattling basket of dried, pungent herbs, a last, desperate hope for distraction. They advanced to the ravine where the sun moss grew thickest, and then the ground began to ripple. From beneath the moss-covered mounds, from the hollows of rotten logs, and from the deep, damp earth itself, the Scolopendrids emerged. Not one or two, but a dozen of the gigantic black creatures, their long antennae twitching frantically in the sudden burning light. "Fire! To the nest!" Jorun roared. This momentary distraction was all Jorun needed. He brought the heavy copper maul down on the head of the centipede that had attacked Aric, crushing the forward segments in the brain case with a wet, shattering sound. The huge body twitched violently before falling still, its legs ceasing their rapid motion. The battle became a desperate, primal clash. The centipedes, protectors of their young, fought with furious, blind instinct, lunging at the humans. The villagers fought with the terror of starvation and paralysis driving their arms. The copper nets proved marginally effective, ensnaring a few segments, causing the creatures to thrash violently and snap at their own legs to free themselves. The copper spears, wielded with focused, two-handed force, cracked through the armor of the mid-body segments. The fighting lasted a few hours, but it felt like a lifetime. The villagers retreated, their clothes scorched, their bodies bruised, and their hands trembling. Only 6 of them had been stung, and those 6 were dragged back, rigid and silent, for the inevitable, terrifying wait. They had, however, suffered no deaths. "It is done," he rasped. Oakhaven is safe. The moss is ours. Yet there were no cheers. The men and women stared into the flames, then into the dark, silent forest. They had won the battle for their survival, but they had paid an unforeseen price. Oakhaven was safe, but it was no longer innocent. The tale of the Scolopendrids became a terrible cautionary myth, a reminder that sometimes the creatures you fear the most are merely guarding the things you need, and that the silence left after a desperate victory can be more terrifying than the fight itself. The villagers had bought their future with blood, and the price they paid was the stillness of their own consciences.